One. We're back to the Neil Haley Show, and my guest today is Debra Palmer. She's a PhD in nursing, and we're going to talk. Our topic today is Between Wounded and Well: Lessons in Healing, a Nurse Practitioner's Memoir. Uh, Debra, thanks for stopping by, and wow, to decide to put this on as a book, it's got to feel good to have it done, right?
Thank you, Neil. Yes, I'm glad it's done, and I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, how does your book relate the process of emotional healing to the process of physical healing?
So, my book uses a metaphor of physical wound healing to help explain our emotional and spiritual healing. There are 4 stages as we heal tissue, and I use those stages to kind of explain emotional and spiritual healing.
Before I want to jump into this, so you really don't we get confused when we talk about healing physically or emotionally. We could get injured so badly and then get healed, but yet emotionally, we're just not there yet.
So true. You see, our thinking, our brain, our thoughts, and our feelings, our emotions, they're directly connected to each other and to our soul. The soul is that force or energy that connects us to something greater than ourselves. It provides a purpose to us. And that's what motivates us to want to stay well. And I tell the story through the lens of a nurse because I see healing as holistic. You always have to connect our thoughts, our feelings with our sense of purpose.
Yeah, and that sense of purpose is so important. When what are the 4 stages of healing?
Physically, they're hemostasis, inflammation, proliferation, and maturation. If I were to turn those into the 4 A's of emotional healing, it would be awareness, acknowledging universal connections, actions, and acceptance.
Wow. Okay. Powerful to think about those types of healing, each one of them, and see how different they are. Has anyone ever looked at it and said, let's look at the first stage of healing physically versus emotionally and how they kind of look at each other in certain ways? If you're in that pain, do you feel a lot of people are physically uh, trying to heal are emotionally in the same spot?
Oh, yes. So that first stage of healing, when we're starting to bleed, we want to survive. We have to constrict our blood vessels. We have to constrict everything or shut everything out of our life that's not contributing to that survival process. And you're just focused on, I need to stay alive. And what's going to help motivate that is understanding why. What's your reason for getting up tomorrow, for wanting to get well? If we can't connect the patient with that or with ourselves with that, um, we might lose sight of hope for a better tomorrow.
So those relate so much to each other in so many ways. And when you're looking at those stages of healing physically, is it a harder battle? Which's harder, emotionally or physically?
Well, I think our body naturally, physically knows how to heal itself. So it's on autopilot. But we have to be prepared for our body to heal and be on autopilot, meaning we need good self-care practices. We need to be adequately nourished. We need adequate rest and sleep, numerous other things. So that's we are designed to heal physically. But emotionally, that design to heal, to connect with our purpose, to motivate us to heal, sometimes that's been injured by things in our past, obstacles, adversities, trauma, and we sort of shut down. And so I think the emotional healing is more difficult. And then you take it another step to our spiritual healing, connecting to our superpower, the universe,
Yeah.
universal light, whatever you want to call that. Um, Different cultures, I think, can cloud the issue of what spiritual healing is all about.
Right. So there's really three forms of healing then, in a way.
Physical, emotional, and spiritual.
And that spiritual one no one brings up. And that could mean whatever type of belief system you have then.
Right. So as a nurse practitioner, when I was teaching students how to do a physical, how to do an assessment on their patient, it always included physical assessment skills, cognitive and emotional assessment, and when appropriate, spiritual assessment. And that concept kind of scared me as a professor. How do I teach somebody how to do a spiritual assessment? Um, but it's quite easy. We have tools, valid, reliable tools, questions that we can ask patients that will help align their purpose and values with their actions. And that's what helps them heal. It might be a religion that has values and expectations, but it might just be a personal set of values that motivate you on your life journey.
And see, that's interesting. And what the form when thinking of spiritually, because I think this is really interesting. When you think of the spiritual side of things in so many aspects, what do you look at? What do you look at like spiritually and saying like belief system? How do you have that assessment with somebody? Because they could either be believing in some form of God, they could even be spiritual believings, like believe that it's all about self-talk and it's about the law of attraction. It's about believing that you can heal, knowing that you're going to be fine, having that system versus, very, very strong in Christianity, Judo Christianity types things, or another way.
It's as simple as asking a person, in the past, what things have helped you get through difficult times? And they will help define it themselves. We don't have to have the answer. We can set our own personal values and beliefs about our own spiritual well-being aside, and we focus in on that which drives a person's motivation to be well, their values and beliefs or their experiences. Well, for example, some might say, well, in the past it was people that go to my mother's church, or people at the Jewish Community Center, or it might have nothing to do with the religion, but my family. We have very strong family connections and values. It may be at that moment in time, their purpose might be a family member to help them along, or their profession.
And that profession is interesting. So, in defining spiritual, it's a difficult thing to define. It sounds like.
Well, it's different for everybody. There's no one right answer, and it's based on their previous experiences, what they have learned about who they are, where they come from, what gives them value and purpose. For me personally, I grew up in the Christian faith, and that's where my sense of purpose and value came from.
Right. And that interesting. Okay. So, what are the 7 practices for emotional well-being?
Thank you for asking. So these, I call them reoccurring resilience practices. The first one aligns very closely with stage 1 of healing. It's when it's seeking a personal, purposeful connection that provides purpose and meaning in your life. Asking yourself, does this align with what gives meaning in my life or purpose in my life? The second one is prioritizing that self-care. We need to be asking ourselves, what are we doing to get adequate rest and sleep? Eating healthy? Are we getting regular physical exercise in our life? Are we incorporating stress management principles? The third one is participating in meaningful and supportive partnerships. What I mean is supportive partnerships with family members, friends, communities, or even professional support services in your life. Asking yourself, is there some professional service that might enhance my health and well-being right now, or my occupation, or my finances? Knowing when to ask for help. And then that third one, pardoning yourself and others with compassionate acceptance. Who and what needs to be forgiven in your life? Number 5, purposeful, perpetual, lifelong learning. Have you made efforts to satisfy your own personal curiosity and take time for learning about yourself, about others, and the world? I think we have natural curiosities and sometimes we don't follow them. Number 6, protect your perimeter. Always make room for healthy boundaries, bringing in that which is helpful and keeping out that which is harmful in your world, um, excluding things that are interfering with your positive well being. And number 7, provide praise and appreciation. In other words, gratitude. Have you made an effort to be grateful or thankful for things in your life? Not only the positive, but even the seemingly negative things, because you never know when those become the learning experiences that will promote your positive well-being later on.
Yeah. And if you live those practices, what do you see happening to you?
It builds resilience. I think it helps you overcome difficulties. And again, it's different for everybody, and it's a constant reoccurring giving and receiving of each other's time, talents, and resources. You see, for me, that is the crux of healing, physical, emotional, and spiritual. When you are giving your time, your talent, and your resources, you are discovering purpose and meaning in your life. When you accept others, their time, their talent, and their resources, you are discovering gratitude.
Interesting. Definitely, some of these things really are important for you to feel good because if you can find that, then you're going to heal more quickly as well for emotional well being, for sure. What role did religion have in your healing journey? You talked a little bit about your religion already.
Well, in my early life, it gave me a sense of who I am, what my values were, and how to conduct my daily life. It was standards of life practices. And then as I was struggling in my young adult life, I saw a lot of conflict in the world and some discrepancy between what some faith traditions were saying and what they were actually doing. You know, I lived through the beginning of television evangelism and discovering, oh, people don't always do what they tell us to do to be good Christians. And so I got skeptical and I spiraled down. I had lost my anchor for a while. And eventually I found that anchor really wasn't a religion, a theology that was man made. It was what helped build man made religions to give us guidance in life. It was my personal connection with the Creator God. And from that point on, whenever I had struggles, I would grasp hold of that belief. That was the anchor that held me when I was going to float, when I was going to be adrift. And I used sacred scriptures to guide me. I followed the Old and New Testament teachings, and oftentimes other spiritual practitioners because there are a lot of overlap.
Hmm.
Currently, I'm in the process of writing a daily devotional, and this
Uh,
is an offshoot of what happened in the last section of my book as I was struggling becoming retired as a nurse practitioner. I said, "Oh God, what do I do now? I don't even know where to begin." I had moved 4 times in the last 6 years. I lost connections. I just didn't know where to begin. And as I prayed, I got this message that said, "I want you to read the Lord's Prayer every day, meditate on that, and talk to me about it." So I have been journaling that for about the last 5 to 7 years. And I am now going to write a devotional based
that's
on that.
fantastic. Yeah. See, there you go. One
That's
book
my
to the
new
next one.
purpose.
Yeah. Okay. And you're just going through it for sure. Why can't healing happen in isolation? And what role do others play in their journey, in the journey?
So, as I mentioned earlier, healing is this constant giving and receiving time, gifts, and talents. In other words, it's a reciprocal relationship. It doesn't happen in isolation. We can't give and both give and receive to others in isolation. We are meant to be in connectional relationship with each other and with the Creator. That is my personal belief.
Interesting. And I think that that's true. And you think about specifically if you're in isolation, especially with others, the others are help in that healing journey. Those others kind of give you that, okay, I'm going to get healing for that reason. But if you have no one to heal for, why heal?
Well, that's part of it, but also with other people in your life, you develop a sense of accountability and learning from each other. You develop mentorships. All of this contributes to our well-being.
So, how does childhood trauma impact adulthood?
This question has been asked of me by every interview I've had, and I have to start by saying I'm not an expert in psychology. I'm not a counselor. Only can speak from my own personal experiences and what I've read by the experts. I think a childhood filled with adversity and chaos uh, overstimulates their nervous system, and they develop a need to self-soothe and self-calm, and they develop certain behaviors. Dr. Vincent Folletti, who authored the Adverse Childhood Experience Study, discovered that the more adversities in childhood, the more damage to two parts of our brain that contribute to behaviors that cause chronic diseases. Fast forward, it damages, we now know on MRI that it damages part of the memory and part of our self-soothing abilities. So we develop behaviors, obsession, OCD, or uh, needing to soothe with drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, sex, gambling, repetitive behaviors. And there are consequences to this. And some of the consequences of overeating to soothe, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, smoking. We get lung disease, asthma, emphysema, cancer. It goes on and on. And then when we're in adulthood, we have the tendency, because our memories stick to what was negative more than positive. If we are experiencing something that triggers a memory of those adversities, it might put us into this need to self protect again and maybe start some of those unhealthy practices: smoking, drinking, drug abuse, cutting out people in your life that are helpful for you. So that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is that the nervous system is sort of dysregulated in childhood, filled with adversity. And that dysregulated nervous system um, can present itself in unhealthy behaviors. Also, it presents itself in poor immunity, maybe more recurrent infections, uh, um, poor relationships, because not always being on the go in our mind, like our mind is jumping from topic to topic to topic because we're constantly on high alert trying to self-soothe. We don't have the bandwidth to really fully appreciate sometimes when people are trying to connect with you in a healthy way. There's a tendency to get defensive. And I know for me, I exhibited it in what I called codependent behaviors. I was always out there trying to be a helper. One of my friends says, God, you think you're a savior or something? And I really had to do some self-reflection. And I realized I had something called codependence. I was putting the health and well-being of others ahead of my own. And then I was suffering. I wasn't getting adequate sleep, rest, eating right, getting my exercise, prioritizing healthy relationships over unhealthy relationships. I'm not sure if that answers your question,
Yeah, so,
but
so I'm interested to know about childhood trauma more. What do you define childhood trauma?
well, my experience with this topic is based on the study by Vince Folletti, and he identified 10 adversities that are examples of neglect and abuse. And they happen in a dysfunctional family. Things like growing up in a home without a parent. Oh, excuse me.
I couldn't hear that,
Without
so don't worry about it. So keep going. Yeah.
growing up in a home without a parent due to death, incarceration, divorce. So just having one single person, sexual abuse, molest, uh, emotional abuse, um, living with alcoholism, drug abuse, um, mental illness. parents with these problems, they cause a child to get confused and not know who's there for them. So they start looking in other places to find that soothing connection. But as children, we want to please those parents. And those parents with all these problems are really hard to predict. We're always on high alert, trying to not trigger them to get angry or mad at us, to please them. So those are some examples.
Can you have childhood trauma that's outside of the home? So you have a good home life, everything's going well, because a lot of people don't identify childhood trauma, and it's good to identify and go back in your life and say, did I have certain childhood trauma? Could it being bullied in school be considered childhood trauma? That you really had a good home life, but really not as safe outside of the home.
Beyond the adverse childhood experience study, there are other studies that have identified environmental traumas related to community and environment. I totally agree with you. But oftentimes, those bullies out in the community were the victims of their own childhood adversities, having high numbers of from 1 to 10, those childhood adversities. They become the abuser later on.
Interesting. That's just quite interesting that I didn't. I mean, let's think about. I'm just saying someone being bullied. They could have gone through specifically another type of traumatic experience. That's childhood trauma too. So a lot of times we forget these things. A lot of times we block out a lot of the difficult experiences we had in school that weren't really happening at home. That
We,
happens.
we also block out things that happened in home because we think they were normal. The adverse childhood experience study said childhood adversities are very, very common. 70% of a white, middle class, highly educated population that was surveyed in the study had reported 2 or more ACEs, adversities. Very common, but often overlooked and ignored and not fully recognized. Like, what is alcoholism? Oftentimes they never identified it. They just said, oh, my parents drink. They didn't realize it was an addiction. They couldn't stop drinking, or drug abuse, or bullying in the home, thinking it's normal,
Wow.
things like that.
Interesting. And then that really stems in all the things you talked about. That ends up, you end up in the hospital more. You end up having less grounding in certain aspects, for sure. Uh, what do you want readers to take away from your memoir?
Well, I want them to be educated about healing stages, but I want them to be inspired and motivated to care for themselves by never giving up hope for a better tomorrow.
Absolutely. That's important for sure. Looking at, do you have plans to write more in the future? You talked about your, your devotional, but anything else?
Yes, I just had a phone call during this conversation. It's with a person who's asked me to write his story. He is in my book. It's about a person that was a dwarf and a severe speech impediment, and his parents were encouraged to find a conservator for him when he turned 18 after living in institutions all of his life, and they didn't. And he has struggled his entire life. So I'll be working on his story. But the one that I'm really excited about is a 4-book series, Between Rivers, based on the saga of my ancestors, French fur traders and Native Americans in America, who founded the very first department store in the US on the Mississippi River, a trading post.
You know
I
what?
use I use these stories, the saga, as a metaphor for universal things that cross time, geography, and cultures.
It's amazing. You think about this is that you found so many different ways to carve out writing to keep yourself busy for sure. Writing. You must be
And
very passionate about it.
I never wanted to be a writer. I was ridiculed. I was a poor writer. I was defensive. My husband typed one of my first papers and he said, Debbie, your writing sucks. You need some help here. And so I've always been overly sensitive about my writing abilities, and I really struggled to give myself permission to try this, and I've been astonished at, the number of positive reviews that commented on my writing.
Wow.
So never underestimate your abilities. Be curious about life.
You know, it's so, but what made you want to be a writer?
Telling my story to motivate others to get healing, to become healed, to share my story. Part of it is a testimony to my own personal faith.
So faith led to you getting out there and writing, it sounds like.
I think it was a calling inside of me. It's not that I necessarily wanted to do it. It was a calling, kind of like when I became a nurse. It was
Hmm.
a calling that called me to a sense of purpose and meaning in life.
See, I find this is a fascinating story because what you've done is you've found that way. Now you're writing, and we talk about all these projects. You're staying busy, writing, enjoying life, and it's fantastic. Where can people pick up the book? Where can they go?
It is it's available at all bookstores. You can ask for them to stock it or order it. It's available on Amazon. It's available as an ebook, an audiobook, and in print. And during the month of May, I have decreased the price to celebrate Nurses Week, 99 cents for the ebook on Amazon.com, but it's available everywhere. Between Wounded and Well, Lessons in Healing. It is also, you can learn more about it on my website, and you can click on that and it'll get you to the various bookstores. Debra, Debra, Palmer, Palmer, DebraPalmer.com.
Well, thank you again, Deborah. What a great conversation. People
Thank you,
definitely need
Neil.
to check out the book, but I'm excited about your passion. Keep on
Thank you.
writing and telling other people they can do it too. Thanks again.
Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.